And we are back on Big Board Sports as promised. Paul Carcaterra, ESPN Lacrosse analyst, joins us to get us even further set. It's an all-week topic and it's an all-day topic. The big one tomorrow, UAlbany, Denver at Hofstra, quarterfinals, a game that UAlbany has not been able to get over the hump in. Will this be the year? Paul, Roger Weiland, Chris Honorado, good morning.
Good morning, gents.
Appreciate it. I don't think we'll need a blowtorch this weekend, right? I mean, this should be a really close competitive game. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, Denver has some secret sauce with Bill Tierney, their coach. His 7 national championships are more than anyone in the history of the sport from a coaching perspective. So it's going to be a really challenging game for Albany. With that said, I think this is a special team. It's a special year, and I still favor them to win the game, but no blowtorch. I think Denver's been playing great defense. It's an area that a lot of people aren't talking about. They're long and athletic there. Their goaltender has struggled in times, but when he plays average ball, they're a tough unit to score on. So I don't anticipate like a crazy high-scoring game, but I think it's going to be competitive, and Hofstra should be juiced tomorrow.
Now, I know Chris will get into the dot with you a little bit, but I want to get into Connor Fields. Well, what do you know that we might not know? Do you think he's going to be close to 100%? Because when he was 100% beginning of the year and the best player in the team, one of the best players in the country, UAlbany was the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be 100%, but I will. Let's hit the rewind button. I would unequivocally say before his injury, he was the Tewaaraton winner as the top player in college lacrosse. With that said, he was probably last week. I mean, you throw these numbers out there. What do they really mean? If he was 60, 70%, it was still good enough, because the one area where I'm just not convinced he's anywhere near 100% is his inability to bang on defenders. And if you watch Connor over the 4 years, especially the last 2 years, when he's playing at his best, he really, even though he's a smaller guy, gets into his defenders and is aggressive and kind of bangs and leans that top shoulder and then gets the defender off balance. You're not going to see a lot of that with the instability in the knee, in my mind. But with that said, you still get a player with elite vision, and just look no farther than last week when he had 5 assists, and an incredible lefty shooter. So I think you're just going to see less of the one-on-one game in terms of him testing his defender, but on extra man, in transition, spot-feeding guys when they're cutting and there's patterns in the Albany offense, he's still elite.
ESPN's Paul Carcaterra with us here on Big Board Sports on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. Paul, you brought it up when I saw you after the ESPNU broadcast at UAlbany on Saturday about the new brace that Connor Fields is wearing, and Roger and I spoke with Connor about it yesterday, and he said it feels more stable. It feels like there's more structure there, and he can trust the knee a little bit more. I would agree with you. I don't know that he's 100%, but he's playing with a lot more confidence than we've seen over the last month and a half.
Yeah, he certainly is. I mean, you could tell when they put him in some of these games early after the initial injury, after they played UMass Lowell in late March, he just didn't look confident. His body language wasn't what we were accustomed to seeing. And last week I saw the body language increased. And I think the stability on the knee with the new brace is a huge plus, because the way he explained it to me, like he just doesn't feel right now like his knee could get hyperextended, and that was kind of the issue with the pass brace. So I love the kid's game. I love his spirit. I think he's so tough. You look at him, you wouldn't think like, hey, that's one of the toughest guys in college lacrosse. He's like 165 pounds soaking wet, but his background coming from Western New York and Buffalo and playing hockey his whole life and being a competitor, I want the ball in his stick, whether he's got one leg, two, sprained MCL, a knee brace or not. He's just a gamer, and I think having him on the field gives confidence to the rest of that offense too. And when you have a passer like Connor, you move differently. It's a lot like the kid from Cornell, Jeff Teat. When he's involved in the offense, even if he's not scoring goals, the offense moves differently because they know they can get the ball. I mean, you're not going to cut as hard when a guy has the ball that you know doesn't have passing ability, but you will when it's Connor Fields.
You'll be on the broadcast tomorrow, ESPN2. It's a ESPNU. It's a 2:30 game at Hofstra. Paul, okay, here's the question and the matchup everybody's talking about. As much as Scotty Marr wants to downplay, this isn't Trevor Baptiste versus T.D. Erlin. This is UAlbany Denver. All eyes are going to be at that face-off dot between Baptiste and Erlin, two of the best to ever do it, and TD's only a sophomore. How do you see this matchup shaping up, and how critical is it that UAlbany wins there?
I think it's way more critical for Denver and Trevor Baptiste to have like a Superman performance than it is T.D. Erlin and Albany at the face-off X. And I'll tell you why. I think Albany is a better team than Denver. If you look at it from the goal to the attack and in between, Albany has all the pieces for a championship team right up the middle with a goaltender in J.D. Colarusso, who's one of the best in the country. You have a guy like Erlin, and then you have that attack. So right up the middle, they're lethal. Denver has some holes. I think that Trevor Baptiste will have to have a huge, huge day and probably win over 70% of the draws for Denver really to have an opportunity, because Denver doesn't hit in transition like Albany does, and Sean Mell, their best long-stick midfielder, is academically ineligible, and he was their best guy in terms of trigger and transition. So you took that aspect out of Denver. So the way that I break this all down is like if TD wins 30% or 35% of the face-offs, which he never does because he's winning at 83% this year, Albany can actually still win. But if Trevor Baptiste wins 50% of the face-offs, there's no way I see Denver winning this game. So I think like the face-off X means more to Denver than it does to Albany, because Albany has the pieces to the puzzle to kind of absorb some of the hit. And when you look at this matchup one-on-one, Baptiste is a 4-year guy. He's been a first-team All-American since his freshman year, so he's been in these big spots before. He's won a national title as a freshman and being the best face-off guy in the country. He also outweighs TD by about 40 pounds. So TD, technically, in terms of just the way that he gets over the ball and uses his leverage, is more important than it's ever been, because TD struggled in one game this year against Yale, and Connor Mackey really, really gave all that TD could handle and then some. He beat him up pretty good, and statistically he owned the battle as well. He outweighed TD by a lot. But I think TD's learned from the experience, but I still give the edge to Baptiste because of the wars that he's been in and the weight discrepancy. So TD, from a leverage standpoint, has to really get that left leg. I don't want to get too technical, but he's got to get that over, and he's got to own the leverage game. Because if he doesn't, if he just relies on his quick hands, which at times he has, he can struggle against Baptiste. But the good news for Albany fans, I don't think you need to win, say, 60% of the face-offs to still win this game, where I just don't see Denver winning without Baptiste playing huge.
Paul, last time UAlbany played at Hofstra, they lost in overtime to Notre Dame in a painful quarterfinal matchup in 2014, a game that looked like they had won. They're 0-4 all-time in the quarterfinals, but this is Scott Marr's, in my opinion, best team. I think they're a better team top to bottom than Denver, but I'm far from an expert. But you are. Do you feel like this is going to be the year that this team gets over the hump and gets to the Final Four?
I do, and I think everyone in that locker room feels like it's Final Four or bust. So it'll be interesting to see if they play with that pressure. Because, like you mentioned, 2007 you lose to Cornell, trash off at the end where you think you had the game won. Then it was 2014 and 15 where it was the leads in the second half against Notre Dame, and you lost both of them to the Fighting Irish. And then last year to Maryland, who won a national title. So, this is the one thing the program hasn't done. They've checked every other box. They win these America East championships, their league tournament, regularly. They churn out the best scorers in college lacrosse. They have the number 1 scorer of all time in Lyle Thompson, number 2 all time in Connor Fields. They have Tewaaraton winners with the Thompson brothers. They have first-team All-Americans. This is the one thing the program doesn't have. Final Four championship weekend. You don't want to put pressure on them, but like this is a scenario where it's like this would be a huge disappointment. As much as they were number one in the season for 6 or 7 weeks, if they don't make it to championship weekend, it's a huge disappointment for the Dane train. And I see it happening. I see them making championship weekend. But you don't want them to play with like 20 years of the burden of chasing this carrot, right? You just want them to play their best ball. So Scott Morris, psychologically, I think, has always done a fantastic job getting his team ready. He never puts pressure on his kids. But I'm sure he's nervous, whether he would tell you that or not, because in the back of his mind, that's what he wants too.
Paul, we appreciate a few minutes as always. Have a great broadcast, and we'll see how this weekend plays out. Thanks for coming on Big Board Sports.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.